but they are not. And it is
All right.
absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I will say I did have some Indian for dinner, and so before I didn't realize that Steve was coming in, I was hoping to finally get my dream of having a threesome with two brown people. But
I can leave if
Steven,
you want.
welcome to the show as well.
One of those brown people we can't even see tonight because he's in an undisclosed location. So,
Undisclosed.
Chris, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Okay, good.
What's going on, my guy?
Here we go. Palantir Weekly. We got some stuff to talk about. Steve hasn't been on the pod, I think, in a couple of weeks. So Steve is back for Palantir Weekly. Matt Money, as always. Chris Patel, as always. And myself, Amit. All right. Before we get into any news, first of all, how was your guys' weeks? What are your thoughts on some of the macro? Palantir, 16, 15, 17 bucks. What are you thinking? Let's start with Matt, then Steve. Go ahead, Matt.
What am I thinking? I don't know. Part of me, I continue to sell my covered calls, right? I don't sell very close to the money. I think next week I have them for like 23 or 24 expiry. Been collecting a little bit every week, a couple $100. Like, I'm not trying to do super close to the money. I just want to make sure if they do get called away, it's going to be at a pretty extravagant price. I honestly am just in this limbo, right? And it's not just with Palantir, it's the whole market of, like, at least when we were down when SPY was at the 380s and 370s, it's like, okay, well, I don't think it's going to go much down further from here. So you kind of had a bottom. It's like, well, are we going to roll over? Are we going to have more like hype that we've kind of had? I thought that this hype would have died 10% on the SPY/Qs, 10% ago. And here it is still running. So it gets me a little, but every stock is getting long in the tooth, it feels like. But at the end of the day, sometimes that's when you end up making the most and time in the market at that point. But anyway, back to Palantir. I welcome it, man. I'll just continue to write my cover calls. And if it goes back down, hell, maybe I'll start writing some cash secured puts again as well.
Okay, Steve, your thoughts on the market, what things are doing?
Yeah, so my article on Palantir dropped today. It's actually trending on Seeking Alpha right now.
There you go. Congrats.
Macro overview on why the Fed decision is actually good for Palantir. So
before we get into like the AI portion of your article, why don't you give us a little bit of that? Why is the Fed decision good for Palantir?
Yeah, because they're holding rates. They are not cutting in 2023 like people thought. And Amit, have I not been saying that they are not cutting in 2023?
You did say that. You have been saying that.
I am pretty convinced that they are not going to cut. I could be wrong, but it seems like everybody at the Fed is pretty adamant that we are going to see raises. If they're taking a hawkish stance, whatever, probably not cutting. That means that rates are going to be at 5.25. Palantir has $2.8 billion in cash on hand. They have about 1.5, 1.6 invested in short-term liquidity. So they're just going to be able to generate investment income at a higher rate for longer because the Fed is going to keep rates up. And because they have no debt, they are not paying interest on any debt. They don't have those payments. It's a beautiful thing. And it's forcing companies to rethink their internal businesses. They're seeing what is going on at the AIP conference. When you have Cisco, when you have Jacob Solutions talk and show these demos, and you have BP come out and all these other companies, people are taking notice. Companies are taking notice, and they're probably knocking on Palantir's door trying to figure out how they can become more efficient and save money, because there are companies with billions and billions and billions of dollars in debt. And if some of it's variable, higher rates, which means they have higher interest payments, which means they need to cut expenses if they're not growing, if their growth isn't outpacing their expenses. So Fed decision is actually good because this is when companies are investing in streamlining processes. When things are going good, companies are a bit slower to retool for efficiency. They're looking more at growth.
Okay. Chris, your thoughts on some of the macro and what's going on in the markets?
Well, things are a lot more overvalued than they were earlier in the year. I think AI has pretty much saved the economy. Everyone had a very bleak forecast of what was going to happen for 2023, and then ChatGPT comes along and just shows everyone the possibilities of AI. And so a lot of companies started benefiting from that. Some because they're service providers of AI, some because they're hardware providers of AI. But what's going to be interesting is finding how each one of those companies end up monetizing. Like, you can only pretend for so long before everyone's going to start to call you out if you're not able to produce, right? So you're seeing a lot of people like the C3 AIs of the world, even to some degree Palantirs of the world. The expectations have been set kind of high. And so any sort of disappointment in that will result in a massive correction, right? So I think everyone is right now on the AI hype train. And I do believe that AI has a significant portion of our future going forward in terms of tech. The only thing I would be curious as is to see who the real winners of AI are going to be. Um, I think Palantir will be just fine because they actually do have products that they've developed using different techniques that some would consider more on the machine learning side, and integrating that with other things that could be classified as AI. But AI is a very broad term right now that isn't 100% defined. Like, AI in more layman's terms should be more like general AI, right? Where you have a sentient being able to like reason. That's not what we have right now. We have large language models which serve as almost like a augmented decision maker based on certain attributes that you feed it, but then also have components where they can make mistakes. And yeah, I don't believe that this is 100% real AI yet, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a business value for it that people can't derive. I also think there's a lot of competitors in the space that are popping up in terms of startup land as well. So I think this is something that Palantir's, either going to be
Chris,
very
let me
successful at
ask you a
or they're going to
question.
lose. Yeah.
At what point does the stock have to be flat for you? I know you don't want to buy right now. I know you don't want to buy at 14. After like 6-7 months, if it's still at $14, do you just bite the bullet and buy because you think the days of 9 and 10 are gone, or do you kind of hold on?
Well, for now, I think I'm more on the side of there are a lot of so the reason why I divested from Palantir is because there's a lot more opportunities out there, especially in the short term, that are a lot more safer, that I don't have to worry about like whether or not they're going to perform or not. It's a matter of just them reverting back to their mean. So it's a much easier decision in terms of investing for me, where I'm not risking capital for possible appreciation, whereas I have other stocks right now that I'm invested in that I know there is appreciation on, right? So from a risk reward standpoint, it doesn't make sense for me to own Palantir right at this moment. Now the whole thing is that could change because the companies that I have could revert back to their mean again, and now I have capital that I can deploy, and then I have to decide like, hey, what's Palantir's real value going to be? I would say right now, based on their operating metrics, Palantir doesn't deserve to be at the level that it does. But then again, 90% of companies that are AI related, quote unquote, are far reaching, way beyond what a traditional valuation would be anyway. So my whole thing is right now is just wait and see where things go. I think that there will be a correction, in which case I'll pick up the shares back at maybe 10 or below. And I don't mind waiting. I'm a patient investor.
Okay, cool. All right. So that's sort of our thoughts on the macro. Let's get into some of the news of what's going on with Palantir this week. I'll get through the government stuff, and then Steve will pull up your article and talk a lot more around AI. So Palantir got 3 governmental deals totaling about $100 million. All of them were sole source contracted deals, which I learned in procurement means there was no other competitors for the deals. So it kind of inclines you to believe that Palantir is the only one that was able to really provide that type of software. And they were deals all provided yesterday, and they're 1-year deals. So it's $100 million for top line revenue just for 1 year. I guess let's start with you, Steve. Can you speak to some of the major implications of Palantir getting these governmental deals, this kind of sticky revenue from it, and why you think that we got those deals in the first place?
Mate, you said they're sole source.
Yes, they're sole source.
Beautiful thing.
I learned what that meant today, so that's new to me.
Well, it means it's the only game in town.
Yes, that is true.
I mean, sole source is very hard to come by in the procurement world. I mean, that's very good. And look, it's very sticky because, as I said to you before, when companies transition into a piece of software, it is very hard to do a secondary implementation 3 or 5 years down the road to get out of it when you've moved everything on. It's not just monetary capital, it is staff time and resources. Sometimes you need consultants to come in to augment, sometimes you need to backfill. It is very intensive to go through these things, and especially if the software is generating value and streamlining the process. And I'm not going by what my opinion is or what anybody else's opinion is, because all it is an opinion. We all got one. Nobody knows if we're right or wrong. I'm going by what the biggest companies in the US are saying and what the biggest companies and governments in the world are doing. And they are implementing Palantir's software. And that counts for more than what any of us think. When Cisco speaks, you listen. When Jacobs Solutions speaks, you listen. When these companies are showing demos and going on about how Palantir AIP or Foundry is transforming their business, people are paying attention, and there's a reason Palantir keeps getting new clients and more deals every quarter.
Okay. Chris, your thoughts on some of these governmental deals, sticky revenue? How do you feel? And does it add a little bit to the moat, given that they're sole sourced?
No, of course, the government revenue is great. Like, you want to have that revenue coming in. It's sticky. It keeps bankruptcy at the fringes, right? So yeah, I think the government part is very healthy. The only thing that I would say is that we don't know what the terms of everything is. So I'm not super optimistic about the government side, because, if you wanted a government software contract, there's plenty out there. Commercial has always been the more, the more attractive part of the business. And that part is still slowing considerably. I mean, we'll see if that reverses in the next couple of quarters, but I've always erred on the side the government is going to be a big business for them, but nothing that's going to see them become a major player in the software space. On the other side, if you have commercial companies, it's a bit different. It is bullish to see a lot of major companies that are brand recognized companies actually come forward and say, hey, we are about this product. One of the key criticisms that you had with regards to Palantir when you did the debate was around, hey, there's no reputable software companies or companies with tech backgrounds that are using Palantir. Well, Cisco just threw that entire thing, out of the way. Like, Cisco is a heavily technology focused company. I'd say that's their core business. So if Cisco is partnering with Palantir, at that point, you can pretty much rule out that, hey, Palantir stuff is just vaporware, right? Like, there's no argument anymore about, hey, only the dumb companies that can't do their own data science use Palantir, because now Cisco, who's a major tech player, is using them. Maybe it's not the Uber or the Lyft that he referenced, but I don't think that matters at this point, because you have a major player like Cisco. And I think that's what we're going to see going forward. We're going to see more major infrastructure players on the tech side end up partnering Palantir and utilizing some of the software that they have and some of the key components that make Foundry a great product. And that will be a telling sign.
Okay, Matt, your thoughts on the government deals?
The thing that only bothered me about it all was that it's only a 1-year deal. It kind of makes me feel like, what's the, I guess, terms behind that, right? Is this particular, what they're going to be building customized for these particular 3, I guess, parts within the DoD? Is it going to be, or government, is it going to be something that is trialing out? Is it something where they know they're going to be expanding in a year, so that's why it's only a year? So that kind of gets me thinking. I mean, we see a lot of these 1-year deals, and it's like, are we going to be coming back around in a year's time and signing more? Or is it going to be something where it doesn't work out? Not everybody that signs on stays on with Palantir, right? It requires a lot of moving of the ship, as we've talked to, right? And it requires a lot of infrastructure change within your organization. It requires a culture change within your organization. So will it fit in this particular part of the government? You never know, right? So to even as successful as Undisclosed Oil Company's contract has been with them, even we and myself had doubts as to whether or not it was going to work. And that was like within 6 months of starting to use the software. So it requires a lot of trial and error and, willingness to fail, which I know that, I don't know, Chris, maybe you could speak to that better. I think in the government and the DoD, sometimes they like to be more rigid, but other times, specifically when it comes to military, that they don't mind trying and innovating new things. So I don't know. It just makes me feel like, why wasn't it 3 years? Why wasn't it 4 years? Why wasn't it 5? But
I mean,
it's nice to see the ability to add to that. I think what it was a sandbagging of the full year 2023 revenue number. Sorry to cut you off, Chris.
No, I'm sorry. I was trying to cut you off. No, I would say from a DoD perspective, there's definitely an evolution going on in the DoD space where, the way that you used to procure things is completely different from what Palantir has basically opened up the contracting space to. So as an example, usually you have an RFP where you basically say, hey, I need a product that does X, Y, and Z. Here's a little bit of money, go develop it, and then do an open bidding contract with all the vendors who want to bid for it, and then the government chooses who they want to go with, right? Traditionally, that's how you procure military equipment, especially large order stuff. So if you want an aircraft carrier, you're not just going to say, hey, you go window shopping and you find an aircraft carrier. Usually you have proposals that are out there, and then the bidders bid on it, and then eventually they bid, they build it. Usually there's cost overruns. The DoD contractors know how to milk the system. Palantir came in and said, look, we're not going to do that. We are going to sell you software, and we'll help you customize the software that we create for you, and make it so that it's something that you guys can use, but it's not going to be centered around going through this long process of trying to create custom shit and then overcharging the taxpayer. And there's a lot of vested interests that aren't happy about that, but at the end of the day, if your technology is better and it's better for the taxpayer, then why not? So Palantir definitely opened up a lot of business for themselves via their lawsuit with the Army. So I think that'll be a healthy thing. And now they're actually able to prove that their technology works on the battlefield, which is a big thing, because I think a lot of times, people can come and criticize and say, oh, well, you're selling us a bill of goods that's not really there, that doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. Well, how can you say that now? Because I'm sure that the intel community in the military are watching what Palantir is doing in Ukraine and saying, hey, we want a piece of that. We need to have a technology that's enabling that level of intelligence gathering and mission planning that's actually happening, where a small country with a ragtag of people are actually fighting off the Russians. I mean, that is a big challenge, and yet the Ukrainians are successfully, at least to a certain degree, defending themselves against the Russians. So I think the question that Palantir, whether that's going to be a big player for the military going forward, I think that's already been answered. That's definitely going to happen. The only thing that I would say about that is that it is not going to be a growth driver that's going to see this company S curve. That's going to come from commercial adoption. So yeah, I think right now is a great time to be a Palantir employee, especially on the government side, because now you have a lot of credibility, which you might not have had 5 years, 6 years, even 10 years ago.
And let's build off what Chris said. The partnership with Microsoft getting expanded is huge. So I'm just going to read the quote. On April 5th, Palantir and Microsoft expanded their cloud partnership to the public sector and will bring best-in-class cloud components to the federal marketplace, which will be supported through IL6 cloud components to the federal marketplace. I mean, that's huge. When you start doing that, Microsoft, Amazon, Palantir, the only three that have IL6. Palantir is partnering with Microsoft even further. Things are going to be good.
Okay, very cool. So
wait, hold on. Just one thing I just want to reiterate, just to bring up. I think it's kind of shameful how politicians have this unusual amount of power over products, especially around software, that is complete bullshit. And the reason why I say that is because New York City at one point was using Palantir software to great effect, no less. Okay. But then comes in a brand new set of politicians, and they don't like the fact that the results that they are getting are pointing towards one direction. Just because, hey, it's pointing towards one direction, and you don't like that it's pointing to that direction, they think that, hey, Palantir has a negative bias towards that specific point. And I think that's shameful because that is what I see a lot of times in government contracting. And it's that when you have a software product that comes in and shows you where your flaws are, instead of saying, hey, let's improve our way of doing things to make sure that this is not going to keep happening, but no, software is not working and we don't want to use it anymore, and X, Y, and Z, and then they try to get rid of it and all this other stuff, right? Because it's not showing you the numbers that you want. And I think I hate when people do that. That's the one good thing about the private sector versus the government sector. Where the government sector will, blame the software, the private sector will actually make the fundamental changes necessary in order to.
I don't necessarily agree. I mean, a lot of people in the private sector as well will make up stories, and so when you come up, they'll look at part of the data, but not all of the data, to be able to make whatever they think or want to shine as the right thing to do, and the decision that they're making be the best decision. When some of the data might bring up that potential decision might bring ambiguity or has uncertainty or risk associated with it, because that data might be spurious or what have you. The power of Palantir is to remove those people that are just talkers and actually have the ability to incorporate all that data. And I've seen that. I won't say, but I've seen it basically.
No, I'm in agreement with you. All I'm saying is the government side, they won't ever allow that because the same people that are the talkers and not doers are the ones in charge, right? Whereas at least on the private side, you will see those people end up getting ousted eventually, or they'll get rid of Palantir.
But then the other thing is when, like you said, even with the public sector, I mean, you'll have a new CEO come in that might not necessarily fundamentally agree. They might have heard stories that came off the NHS and stuff like. I've heard of regime changes within organizations that then unfortunately turn their back on Palantir because of the partnership. And some CEOs don't want to have that large of an in-depth partnership with another organization. They want to have their own culture and things of the like. And I've seen that happen, not just with Palantir, by the way. I mean, I've seen it happen all the time. A new CEO comes in and they want to do their route shift as to where they think the boat should be heading and the ship should be heading. And so with that, they sometimes make some rash decisions or sometimes some justified decisions. Not every company will need Palantir. It's really the companies that truly want to make a fundamental shift and really transform their business digitally, versus if you kind of just want to keep what you're doing and make it slightly more efficient. I say this all the time, Microsoft Fabric or Snowflake could be a great product as well. But I think if you're truly struggling and you're kind of losing your mojo, you're a very mature business, you want to kickstart yourself up again, that's where Palantir really comes in. And you're tired of, let's just say you have a 100-year organization and the organization's just been trying to build on top of the things that people used to do. And you kind of get into this, oh, well, that's what so-and-so used to do. So I started to do it now.
You're talking about IBM.
You have all these utility companies, people that refuse to change. I mean, you see this all over the place. That's why everyone loves SoFi so much. It's like you have this historic industries like real estate, oil and gas, and like banking, finance sector, where there's margins just taken out of everything. And so it's historic ways of doing things that people have gotten away with for so long. And so now people are really trying to eat away at that and make big shifts and try to get their margins back a little bit compared to maybe the way things have been done for the past 20, 30 years.
I guess Chris's point is just that the politicians that make arbitrary decisions aren't like the companies that have the data points to validate stuff because they have like a political agenda. And that's what fucks Palantir sometimes as well. I'm assuming that's what you meant, Chris.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the UK and NHS, right? I mean, they're the politicians, and sorry, I'm getting slightly political, but I hope Chris agrees with me here. Maybe he doesn't, and that's okay, and we can discuss it. But the thing that the UK has been is you have George Soros that's been pushing not to do anything with the NHS deal because he likes the way that things are. And now we have some sort of new leadership within the UK that's saying, maybe Palantir is actually not that bad of a company. They do want to invest in us. They want to partner with us and make London an AI capital for not just Palantir, but for the world. And so let's partner with those people and bring them into the country. They might be useful. And at the same time, you're seeing Soros step down, bringing Sun in, and yada, yada, yada. I don't think it's coincidence. I think it's very much aligned.
So here's something interesting that I just learned from like one of the Patrick Bet-David podcasts. Basically, my question for a long time was, why is George Soros the way that he is? Like, why does he support the causes that he does? And it was telling, because one of the things that happened to him when he was a kid, I think his mother was raped by like 2 German soldiers, and his worldview was crafted by such things where you have like this concept of open societies, right? Which I know that's why they call it the Open Societies Foundation. But one of the things that he does not want is any sort of Western country to have any sort of power over their own people. And he would rather have open borders and people just basically, my history, no one country would have enough power to make decisions for their own citizens. So he would rather see the world burn as long as basically he was the king of the trash pile. And it's kind of sad to see, because someone who's got that much power is out there using the weight of his money to basically craft policy decisions at the national level.
He gave his money to his son recently, right? Alex Soros.
Yeah, and his son seems to be way worse than him when it comes to this, because now he's actually saying, like, no, I'm going to take it to the next level. As bad as we thought George Soros was, the son is saying, I'm going to pick up the mantle and then some. So I'm kind of like, hey, listen, maybe we need to start working on some sort of either legislation or some kind of policy changes that take money out of politics, so that it can't be as influenced, like political decisions can't be as influenced by money as they are being right now. Because it seems like, dude, did you see the picture of George Soros and Alex Soros? Basically, they've been to the White House more than 12 times. And I think that's shameful to see billionaires so openly, brazenly walking into the White House. And the same thing when it came to the Trump administration, where you had like people that were able to influence the president and politicians.
The problem is Citizens United kind of gutted any chance money would get out of politics, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's such a bad move by the Supreme Court, by the way. Like I'm usually on the side of the conservatives, but I think they got that one wrong, and they got it wrong bad, because now every politician, every billionaire, every even millionaire has the ability to access politicians and help in driving policy towards one direction. And I hate to say this, but it's not it's not the directions that we as normal people like would want. Yeah, so it's just, I don't know. It's just a terrible, terrible system that we have currently.
Okay. Before we move on to the AI part of Steve's article, Matt, we got to address this because people are confused. Lisa says, hi, Amit. Did I miss something? Why Matt always say Palantir to O? Is that a clickbait or zero? Can you explain to 300 people right now that see you on Twitter every day saying Palantir to zero? What do you mean by that?
So I don't see it as much often lately as I have in the past, where there was, I'd say within the last 6 months or so, Palantir has kind of become more of a, I don't want to say household name, but a lot more retail investors have been getting excited about it, picking it up, and they've obviously done well, 100-some% return over the past 6 months or so. You have some people, like the gentleman that wrote the Bear Cave and stuff of the like, that really just will pick it up and say negative things about it, or say it's crap software or anything of the like, to truly just try to just discredit the company without really doing too much fundamental research. They say, oh, they're so secretive about what they're doing, their products. And it's like, dude, like it's, have you looked at their YouTube channel? Have you done any of this actual research to truly justify the words that are coming out of your mouth? And so one of the things that I've really tried to attack, and unfortunately it's bad sarcasm, as you've probably picked up, Lisa, is just people chatting for the sake of chatting and just like keeping their lips moving. If you don't have anything that you truly believe, or you haven't done the research, disclaim that. Be like, look, I could be wrong on this, but I don't understand why Palantir could have X, Y, or Z, or I haven't used it. Like, no offense, and he seemed like a relatively favored gentleman that we had on the show for Finance Junkies, but Ranga, he said the same thing. He's like, Palantir is not a good, I don't see how the software is going to work. It's not going to be a generational sort of company. And I'm like, my guy, I respect the fact that you worked at Apple. I respect the fact that you worked at Tesla. Have you even tried to use Palantir as a software? To immediately just shove it to the side. And then people will, unfortunately, because he has that background of Tesla and Apple, immediately assume, okay, this guy has some sort of credit and he has some sort of ability to know. But in reality, he's just chatting. He doesn't actually know anything about the software. He hasn't done much research, and maybe he has. And I'd love.
But Matt, is that his fault, or is that Palantir's fault for being so secretive?
It's not secretive. It's on YouTube. They could look it up if they truly knew.
No. I mean in terms of utilization, right? Like right now, if I wanted to use Snowflake, I could just go get access as a developer, start using Snowflake, build products on top of it. Palantir still doesn't have that, where you can just go and use the product, right? Guys like him are guys that you typically see in Silicon Valley who want to see a product, use it, and then be able to say yes or no, right? By not having the ability to even remotely use it, you don't really know. Like Coach Strap, if you ever go to Coach Strap interviews, Coach Strap used to be that guy. He used to say, hey, I don't really know shit about Palantir, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually he actually started looking at this.
But he disclaimed it, right? He wasn't like a Ranga to be it's not a generational company. And I'm not trying to pick on Ranga, but like at least Coach Strap would disclaim, like, I haven't used the software, and I remember watching those videos, so I know exactly what you mean. And so that's what the Palantir to zero sort of shit means. That's what Matt Money to zero. That's what Google to zero means. When everybody's just chatting for the sake of chatting, that's when I'll say Palantir to zero, because it's just like they haven't done anything. They're just chatting for the sake of chatting. They're just trying to get their name out there. They're doing technical analysis. They don't know how to do technical analysis, but they're bringing up Palantir so they can get people to watch their tweets. That's the only thing I would say.
The only thing I would say is that because people that will get that reference and laugh at it and say, yeah, I agree. You also have another part of the community that may not know that and may end up just saying, oh, Matt's actually a Palantir bear, because sarcasm is lost in text. Like, I hate to say it. It's just, even sometimes when I put stuff sarcastically, people would, like today as an example. So someone wrote, oh my God, the US government debt just hit $32 trillion. So then I said in my tweet, I said, oh, don't worry about it. I'll have to pay so much in taxes on my sales from SoFi and Palantir that I'll end up paying it off. And someone was like, no, you can't do that. That's like pissing in the Michigan River. And I'm like, bro, I was being sarcastic. I know I don't have $32 trillion.
You got 32 trillion, Chris?
I appreciate the feedback. I think the one thing that I will say is, like, I don't care if everybody likes me. I'm here to add value to a community, and if they want to listen to when I talk, and if they're confused, feel free to challenge me. Right where I block people and where I refuse to negotiate is if people are just being completely unreasonable. One, making fun of physical appearances, or making fun and calling out names and stuff like. Don't agree with that. But if you actually challenge me and you actually are curious, like, Matt, why are you saying that? I'll be more than happy to be like, no, I actually do have the shares. I'll show you the screenshots of my position. I'll show you that I'm writing covered calls. And if you don't like me, that's fine. There's plenty. There's Amit to follow. There's Chris to follow. There's Steven to follow.
But everyone should follow Matt. Matt, out of all the investors that I know, he actually puts his money where his mouth is. He has probably more Palantir shares than all three of us. All right.
Not to mention, I only have like 4,000 shares. It's not a lot.
Yeah, that's more than Amit has, right? That's definitely more than what I have. I barely have any right now, other than what my wife probably still holding.
Steve got 20,000.
20,000 shares of Palantir.
Steve got like 35,000 shares of Palantir.
Steve, what's going on?
See how he's not saying anything right now?
I guess. Yeah, whatever. You don't have to disclose your position, but come on, just at least give us this. Give us the Roman up or down.
The Roman voting, yeah. I like the Roman.
Do you have
I'm gonna give my standard answer. To some people it's a little, to some people it's a lot.
That's what she said. That's not the right answer.
Garbage, man. That's garbage.
Is it above 5,000?
No, just say, is it above Matt? Yes, or below Matt? That's it. We're not asking for like.
Listen, to some people it's a lot. To some people it's a little.
Look, people always say this crap. It's like saying It's like people that don't have $1 million. They think $1 million is a lot, and it's like once you get there, you're like, well, it's a lot and it's a little at the same time, right?
So, man,
exactly. You realize how far the game really is.
At this point, I can tell you he probably has more, because anyone who doesn't want to answer, typically the reason why they don't want to answer is because they have more. So if it wasn't as big, he would have been like, yeah, I have a few thousand shares, whatever, let's go with that. But he definitely has more.
And I'm happy to have someone with such great conviction like Steven on my side for the long-term investment.
Yeah,
Chris,
and same thing with Steven too. Like Steven doesn't just invest in some bullshit companies here and there. He does a lot of research. He writes for Seeking Alpha, cites all of his data. So when you have someone who's, I don't want to say the bear cave guy, because I like the bear cave guy. The arguments that he were making were very superficial, but they were legitimate.
No, they weren't.
Some of them were very legitimate concerns.
No argument he made. What argument did he make that was legit? What argument?
I have to rewatch the whole thing, but there were. No. I mean, there were times, dude.
There was no time, bro. There was no argument.
Let's admit you got a little animated because there were.
No, I agree, but I agree. But what argument did he make that even had a resemblance of? Oh, that's a good argument.
Nothing that comes to mind. I told you that a lot of them were just very superficial. Some of them were very superficial, and that I was like, yeah, I could see that, but it wasn't like, oh my god, I agree.
There were 3 arguments: SPAC,
okay, go ahead.
Glassdoor, consulting firm. That was it.
Okay, so all two of those are actually legitimate, which is, hey, there are bad reviews on Glassdoor. Does that concern you? And the other one was, hey, they made a deal with all these SPACs. Doesn't that concern you? Because that just shows that management doesn't know how to allocate capital efficiently. So those two actually were pretty valid concerns.
The problem is they're years old. That's the issue.
They're less than a year old, but it goes to show you that, hey, maybe management isn't all up there, in terms of business execution.
Chris, you broke out a little bit. Okay, let's ask this one question before we get to your article, Steven. And Chris, I want you to answer this question. Nick says, I have 5,850 Palantir shares at approximately $8. I am up a freaking 40K. Should I profit take? Chris, what is your response to that question?
I would say most investors should not profit take, and they should just stick to their guns and just, because they should be investing long term. No, most investors. Look, I'm a different breed of investor. Okay, like I will move in and out of a position.
Yeah, why did that sound so cocky? I love it though.
No, it's not cocky. It's the truth. I know how to.
You said you're a different breed, Chris. You said you're a different guy. I love it.
Let's just stop Chris right there. We don't know anybody's financial situation.
No, of course, obviously, Steve. Like obviously, that's the
really
answer. But like,
that
I want to know the raw answer. Should someone sell if they're up $40,000?
Well, look, if you're on a YouTube channel asking someone if you should sell, probably I would say that you're not. I don't want to sound offensive, but I would say everyone needs to do things based on their own risk tolerance. Okay, that number may seem like a lot to somebody and very little to somebody else, right? It just depends on perception, as Steven so eloquently put it like about 5 minutes ago. So I don't know what your personal situation is. I don't know what it is, but I would think most retail investors should buy the companies that they like, stick with them long term, not moving in and out of a position. Guys like me, I know what I feel like I know what I'm doing. I can't say 100% I know what I'm doing, but I've been doing this for like the last 12 to 15 years. I have my own personal experiences that I'm putting into my investing style. Some of it's worked out for me very well, other things not so well. I see other opportunities out there. The question that person should be asking is, well, if I do sell, what am I going to do with that money? Is it something that I'm going to actually use to improve my life, improve my investing strategy? Do I think that there's other companies out there that I can gain more from in a short period of time, long period of time, medium time? All these questions, I have no answer for you other than, hey, this is, I can only answer for myself. I can't answer for you.
Look, Steve, I'm going to say 2 things on it. One, whatever money you invest, you should be willing to lose. And 2, nobody ever got hurt taking a profit. Everybody has to do what's best for them. We don't know anybody's financial situations, but it's very hard to get hurt when you take your cost basis out and you're playing with the house's money. So take it for what it's worth.
Okay, Matt.
For me, I always think it's personal finance, and so the way I look at it is I take that same amount of shares. It's give or take the same magnitude of shares that I have, right? I mean, yes, it's 40, 50% more, but at the same time, same magnitude. I look at it as like, okay, if this $60,000, or in this case, $80,000 to $90,000 for this gentleman, goes to zero, which I don't think it will, but if it does, would he be upset, right? And it goes back to Steven's point: are you investing money you can't lose? It also depends on how big his portfolio is. If that's something that he's not sleeping well at night, right, and like it goes back to that personal sort of risk tolerance of things, and he's starting to be like, oh, this is a lot, like, and he's starting to stress over the position, it's not a sign to sell, right? It's a reflection point for that person to say, am I thinking about my long-term investment strategy appropriately? Am I leaning away for it to make a justification for something? If I am leaning away from it, is it okay? Because it always goes back to you, right? I'm okay if Palantir goes to zero tomorrow. That $60,000, I'm not trying to humble brag here, but it's going to sound like it. I'll be okay, right? I'll be okay. I'll work another couple months and I'll make that money back if it goes to zero, right? It's not going to really hurt me all too much. But what I will think that it will do is that 60,000 or 70,000, whatever it is at the moment, will probably end up being a $400,000 or $500,000 investment in the long term. And so for me, that's where my conviction lies. And so selling it at 60 when it could either be zero or 500,000, I'd much rather wait it out. And so I'll take my gains through writing covered calls, which is a strategy that I've kind of used, and not at the money. I like to go further out of the money, 2 to 3 delta a week out, just so that I have more control. So if it does move up, I have that safety. I'm just trying to get an extra percentage points a year. I'm not trying to get 20, 30% a month or anything fucking stupid like that. And that's how I collect my money, right? And I'm, if it got to $100 tomorrow, I'd probably take some profit, but I just think that it's got way more running room personally, right? But it's really about this person sitting with himself. Have the conversation with your wife, or if you are a woman, have the conversation with your husband. Think about, maybe that's an opportunity for you to take and buy a rental property. Maybe your guys' objective has always been to be real estate owners or have a vacation home, and pull a Vitali or pull a Carlos. You don't know. This person could be closer to retirement. He could be 60, 65 years old, have been working for the past 40 years. Maybe it's time to put it into some steady dividend paying stocks that'll pay you a little bit of income. You could retire today. It's really just dependent on your circumstance.
Yeah. Also, you have to set, at least for me, I have set limits on when I want to buy and when I feel that it's overvalued and I should sell. If it starts to hit my overvalued side, I really have to justify that internally in order to keep the shares, especially if we have a down market and there are other alternatives out there that I know can generate the returns that I want and I need in the short to medium term. I think the Palantir one day will be a very big company. I think they're already a big company. I mean, dude, they're what, $30-something billion right now, right? So it's a pretty big company, regardless of, even though the share price, I think that distracts people from realizing how big this company's actually gotten. It's actually got 35 billion. See, that's $35 billion company. Think about that. That means that if they were to double, if it, let's say, goes to $30, this would be a $60 billion company, which is kind of crazy considering how much sales, and they're technically they don't have that much net income just yet. Chris, so in terms of valuation, it's different. Yeah.
Did you read what I sent you by any chance?
I did not get a chance, so I perused through it very quickly, but I didn't read it yet.
What, this is your article?
No, it's something I sent him, but I really think I want to say one thing before we move on and compound off what Chris just said. People would be better off if they started looking at they are investing in a company and becoming an equity owner than buying shares in a company, because that is what you are doing. You are sharing in the profits, you're sharing in the revenue, and your shares represent a percentage ownership of the company. Regardless of how small that percentage is, you are an owner in that company.
You can go to the annual meeting and vote and say no.
It really just annoys the crap out of me when people keep reverting to I bought shares of this, or I'm selling shares of this. Like, you're selling an ownership stake, or you're buying an ownership stake of a company.
Okay, cool.
And another thing, just before we move on, I think something that I've seen happen a lot, and I think that this is something that, and Chris does a good job about talking about this to an extent. Somebody's like, just set a stop loss and it'll be fine. A stop loss won't help you if you set it at $14 and the stock opens at 10. You know what's going to happen? It's going to sell your stock at $10. The $14 is a trigger point. If it goes any share or opens up anytime below $14, it's going to hit a sell. And so what happens is if you truly want to make sure that it doesn't sell anything below $14, it's when you have to buy a put. And so just keep in mind, I think a lot of people are mistaken when they think, oh, well, I'll just set a stop loss. It's like a stop loss helps if you're day trading and you know that it might not jump and open up overnight, minus 10%. But during, overnight or holding it over a weekend, it can happen with SoFi today, right? It opened up down 5-6%. If you had a 2% stop loss on it, you still would have sold 5-6% down. You wouldn't have sold at 2% down.
Yeah, I typically, what I do is if I feel like the company's getting really overvalued, I'll do one of two things. I'll trim a good portion of it, sit in the cash and wait for it to pull back. Or if I believe that there's still a lot more room further up to go, but I want to just protect my downside, I'll sell a little bit and then buy some protection, right? By buying some puts. I don't mind because at that point, all I'm doing is just taking some of my profit, converting it into some puts that gives me an insurance policy on the general market takedown. Because a lot of times companies will fall apart and it has nothing to do with the company's active business, right? The business could still be doing very well, but the market is irrational and it might take your portfolio down at the same time. So one of the things as a seasoned investor that I would say is that don't be afraid to take a small position, small part of your profits, use it to buy some insurance against your downside, because that will save you a lot of headaches in the long run. And not to mention, you'll be able to sleep at night. That's the other thing too. I used to be that guy that liked to wake up in the morning, look at the stock, go to sleep, look at the stock. Why? Because I didn't have any insurance, any protection. Now that I have insurance and protection, I go to sleep just fine. If the morning time the stock opens up and it's 10% down, whatever. I have some puts, no worries. I'll execute the puts, sell it to the schmuck that sold them to me, and chill. I've seen that happen. One of our friends or ex-friends, he used to advocate on selling puts as a way to make income, and that's fine to some degree. But sometimes I would look at it and I was like, man, that position really went against you and assigned you a shit ton of shares at an unreasonable price. That's kind of crazy, So you're basically risking a lot of capital for a very little return. Instead, you should be doing the opposite. But got a different investing style. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about that.
So
okay, well,
we talked about this on.
We did on SoFi. Yeah, we got to move on because we got like 15 minutes left. We got to get to the main topic, but we'll hit that on another topic as well. And Steve, we just talked about on SoFi. Let's talk about your article, Steve. AI.
Okay, sure.
So let's get into this. How is the AI revolution going to help Palantir? I have your article pulled up. You can kind of give us a macro overview of this article.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the interviews from CNBC, I think it came out after I wrote this article. I wrote this Wednesday night, and it came out this morning. Publishing times are not up to the minute. There's a full editorial process that happens on the Seeking Alpha end, so there is a delay from when I write it. But, they were talking about, this is the second time I've heard it this week on CNBC, this is the start of a 10-year cyclical AI boom. And a lot of people are equating this to, you had the internet in the 90s, you had cloud computing, you had the smartphones, and now you're going to have AI. We are at the very early stages. I can't predict the future. I have no idea what's going to unfold. My guess, from what I'm seeing from a lot of different software ends that I use, everybody is trying to figure out how to embed AI into their products. And if you look at what history has shown us, I do think this is going to be the next type of computing platform that takes off in a sense. And there's going to be big implications for Palantir because they are so far ahead of a lot of different companies. And look, I am not a tech genius, okay? But as Chris said before, and as I said, when companies like Cisco that are authorities in this are coming out and showing the demonstrations of how they're using Palantir software and all these other companies, you have to take that at face value. So I actually look, and I'm glad you have this slide up. So when you look at where Palantir said that they were going to be for this year, they said 2.19 to 2.24 billion dollar revenue. On the high end, they would need Q2 to come in at 550, Q3 to come in at 570, and Q4 to come in at 594 to hit that top end. I have a feeling that they're going to come in at more than 600 million in Q4 from the types of deals that we're seeing. Look, Panasonic is not signing this type of deal with Palantir if they don't think that he's going to revolutionize what they're doing in their factories.
That's facts.
These companies and these governments are not signing up with Palantir. And like Chris mentioned, how many companies can actually say that they are battlefield tested? And when you look at these governments, none of these other companies can show what Palantir has done. And then you look at the health systems. You had HCA, and there was another big one at AIP. That is huge for the
Cleveland Clinic. Cleveland Clinic.
That's huge for the what is it? NHI? Or which one is it?
The NHS.
NHS contract coming up. It has huge implications for the rest of the healthcare systems in the US. It's a huge market. And companies still haven't made a full cloud transformation yet. You still have people on-prem with server rooms. I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure upgrades that are going to continue to happen for the next 5 to 10 years. This could be right place, right time. Look, Palantir could go down. It could certainly get back some of the gains that it's happened, but from a 5 to 10 year outlook, and look, I went very neutral on this because I was really upset after that Q2 earnings call. My mind is completely changed, and the type of investments that we're going to see, I think it's going to rival what we saw with cloud computing, not on necessarily the AWS and Azure side, more on the SaaS side. And there's
like
going
the
to be a lot
Cloudflares of the world, not the GCPs of the world.
Yeah, your SAPs of the world, your Oracles of the world, not Oracle Cloud, but the other side of it. But there's going to be a lot of investment over the next 10 years in software. And this is going to be at the forefront. And can you just go up to the, or I guess from where that is, it's down? The customer account.
Oh, that's up. Customer account.
I mean, look, that blue bar for commercial customer account, that is a beautiful thing as we keep growing. It's a story that I'm very excited to see unfold.
Okay. Chris, your thoughts? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think a lot of people have this conception that everything will eventually move to the cloud, and that we've already transitioned into that mode. And I can tell you only about maybe 10% of real infrastructure has ever really moved into cloud, and it's going to the cloud, but it's the thing that I've noticed is that it's going to be more of a hybridized cloud rather than being a complete cloud solution. I think originally the plan was, hey, everyone is going to go to the cloud, and that's all there is going to be. And I'm finding that that's not the case. There's probably a lot still to do on on-prem stuff. That's why companies like Oracle are still doing very well. And that's why IBM acquired Red Hat, because if you really want to do good hybrid cloud, you need companies like IBM who can integrate with both. So
Chris, let me rephrase that. You're 100% correct. You're still going to need network switches. You're still going to need firewalls. You're still going to need APs. You're going to see less server contention in physical server rooms. And you're right, it's going to be hybrid a lot, but software is going to be cloud-based. There's going to be less and less storing the actual software on servers in your server room.
No, it's both. That's the thing. It's going to be both. If you're going to have the same software on both on-prem and in the cloud, what happens is you need to have your software loaded on both, and then they can change intermittently. Like, here's an example, like on-prem stuff, right? When you have a software application, that, let's say, an entire network uses. Let's say 1,000 people uses. You can either have it run on the cloud, where every time you access that application, you're paying for storage and you're paying for compute and you're paying for X, Y, and Z, and the cost of that can be actually very monumental, right? On the other hand, you can have your own server room, right, where basically you have racks and racks of servers, and you put something in between called a load balancer, and every time the application is accessed, what can happen is that load balancer will then focus and send that data transmission to one of the servers, and so your software applications are running from that server. So it all really depends on the use case. But what you can also do is have a hybrid infrastructure where, when you have times where your servers, you don't need, let's say, 12 servers to manage a client application. Let's say you have 1 or 2 servers. That's fine for 90% of the time that you're running your application, because you don't want all the extra costs when it comes to the cloud. Because remember, when you buy on-prem, you're getting one great thing: you're getting a fixed cost, versus when you're in the cloud, you're always paying for cost based on utilization. So if you can maximize your on-prem usage to maximize the revenue that you're not sacrificing to the cloud vendor, that's big. But there will be times where you need additional capacity. So that part you can actually put into the cloud and say, okay, run my application on-prem, but if I need extra resources, boom, you can run into the cloud. Or let's say my on-prem software or my on-prem servers are down for whatever reason, I can transition into the cloud and use, so that users don't feel that interruption. And I think that's where companies like Palantir really come in, because they have the ability to work in all sorts of settings, right? Where you don't need it to be in one specific what is that called, application. So they can move in between the two.
Okay, pretty cool. Matt, your thoughts on Steve's argument around AI basically being the 4th industrial revolution and Palantir being a beneficiary of that? Any perspective from that angle?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't worked too in depth with it at Undisclosed Oil Company. There are a few products that we've used, and I know we're going to trial out AIP here in the future. I've discussed with our kind of internal team, which I'm not a part of, but I reach out with those guys every once in a while because I've worked handily with them since the Palantir team has kind of came into Undisclosed Oil Company. But there's a few products, and like I've said in the past, it's definitely quickened a lot of things that, if the data is input correctly into Foundry, it's definitely helped out significantly in shortening some circuit times of doing certain processes by the order of weeks sometimes. So it could be something that instead of pulling up a program, which sometimes can be clunky and crash, it keeps all the data and has all the calculations within Foundry and uses an engine to basically machine learn and figure out where it needs to run the calculations on a certain pressure point and things of the like. And it does a very accurate job, within 5 percentage points, which, especially if you're kind of just trying to build trends very quickly, within 5%, sometimes if you're just trying to get a general trend, is perfectly fine. Is a well trending towards poor productivity over time, or is it getting better over time, or is it flatlined and you don't need to worry about it? Or is it something where you're like, oh shit, we need to do more in-depth research on this particular well, right? So it allows you to say and focus over a broad field where there might be 30, 40 wells in the deepwater Gulf of Mexico to say, oh, wow, these are our 5 problem children, because this AI work has kind of already demonstrated that. Let's focus on those 5 rather than keeping track of all 30 to 40, because that's what we had to do in the old days, is keep track of all 30 to 40. Every time we had a shut in, we had to look at how the pressure response was, which is basically just measuring, the ability for the pressure responses to go out into the reservoir, a whole bunch of different stupid technical stuff. But at the end of the day, you had to do that for 30, 40 wells. And now you just have to look at the trend lines that the AI in the Foundry platform really helps with, and saves a lot of time.
It's funny. A lot of people are saying Chris's Neuralink is not working. It's because I'm using my Bose headphones. I don't have the proper mic right now. But I was actually just thinking about, how cool would it be for the Neuralink if, let's say, 2 people had it and you can communicate to each other with just thoughts and without actually talking?
Would you actually get a Neuralink?
I mean, eventually when I get old enough to the point where I can't do as many things functionally, like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's going to provide an alternate to certain things. Like, not everyone's body is going to be 100% when they get to a certain age. And so, I think Neuralink could possibly help, especially learning. Like when you get much, much older, it's hard to learn new things. You could probably benefit from stuff like that. I don't know. I'd have to see the capabilities. But
I
if I was,
think by then they're gonna have so many tests that it's not gonna be as crazy. Like right now, it's a chip in your brain. Like it's gonna be 2 decades of them testing it to the point where it's like wearing a watch. It's not gonna be that crazy.
I'm hoping by that point they can just give me a new body.
I don't know if we're getting that advanced.
you mean like transfer your consciousness.
I want to upload my consciousness in 2040. 2040 project.
2040? Is that what they're going?
Wait, but you'll be still alive in 2040. Why are you? That's only
I know,
17.
but there's a whole movement. Look into the 2040 project. It's pretty cool.
That's scary. What I will say is I think what has been kind of the biggest surprise to me is moving from Foundry to now this AI world. It's like I always knew it was kind of coming, digital twins, everything like that. We've always been talking about it, but now moving into this true, like, I don't want to say sentient sort of thing that Chris was talking about earlier, but it's been organized so well from the beginning. It's not like we're sitting here at Undisclosed Oil Company being like, oh crap, AI is coming, so let's reorganize the data. It's like the data is already organized the way it needs to be done because of what we did back in 2017, 2018, and the data flows that have come in since that point. So it's not like we're sitting here being like, oh crap, we need to reorganize all of our data to feed into this AIP, kind of like what everyone talks about, the large language models and everything that you have to do for ChatGPT and stuff like that. It's like we will still have to do a little bit of the commands and making sure that we have things that connect to the right model libraries and stuff of the like, but all those model libraries and ontologies all been set up appropriately already. So it's really just setting up the prompts to be able to access all that data to be able to then put up the guide rails. Like it's something that's actually not going to take all too long versus where I think some people might be starting from right now is, oh crap, we really need to get our data in the right structure and right way to be able to even get ourselves to a place where AI or a program like AIP can truly help us get to that next level of efficiency. And so like just seeing that wavelength over the past 5 to 6 years to now being at the point where we're like, oh crap, let's put up some guardrails and figure out how we can make this AIP thing happen. Like when they showed the demonstration that like Sham saw, like when Sham did that at AIPCon, that demonstration was a very similar to one that we got a few weeks prior to AIPCon, probably like a month ago at this point. And I was just like, yeah, I was like, that doesn't seem too hard for them to implement at Undisclosed Oil Company.
My biggest worry is the concept that always seems to plague any organization, which is garbage in, garbage out, right? So if your inputs are garbage, your exits are going to be garbage. So AI is only going to give you a garbage response. Like you guys saw the thing that happened with that lawyer who went to a court case with like fucking Chat GPT and basically was citing cases that didn't even exist. Did you guys see that? Yeah, I think a lot of people think that AI is here that's going to replace decision making, and it's not. It's only going to enhance decision making. And to some degree, it may actually mess with people because if you get too dependent on AI and AI gives you the wrong answer, you're going to make some dumb moves. You have to treat this like autopilot on a car, right? It's not to the point where you can just sit back and let autopilot do its thing the entire time and you can sit in the back seat. Like, no, you still got to be in charge of the wheel because something happens. The AI, as great as it is, doesn't recognize a bump or doesn't recognize a person. You should be ready to take control. And I think people don't appreciate that. And they think that now that AI is here, everyone's going to lose their jobs and it's going to take over everything. I'm like, no,
it's the contrary.
AI is,
yep.
Yeah.
Contrary.
It's in its infancy. It's going to take so long.
It might get to the point where you're saying that you lose your jobs, but it will take forever. I mean, I think about it a lot. It's like we've had people that are data analysts come into the organization and be like, "Oh, well, these things correlate, so has to be related." And it's like, well, you can, if you look at enough data points, I think there's some things out on Google. I don't know exactly what they are, but it's like you can correlate data with almost anything and get a 0.99, correlation, right? And people are immediately like, well, those are correlated. And we've had people do that as well. So when you're talking about AI, at least at this stage of where it is, you need somebody that isn't just good at data analytics and data science, but you also need somebody that's very good at the underlying industry that they're working in. So you need to work with somebody that works intently at Jacobs to say, okay, this is the guide rail that we need to put in place for this particular prompt because, otherwise this facility won't work the right way. Or the same thing with what I'm working on. It's like you need somebody that has a very firm and strong petroleum engineering background to understand how the AI or AIP can interact with the wells or provide decisions for those wells. Because there's a lot of intricate systems. Are you talking about at the seafloor? Are you talking about the reservoir level? Are you talking about in the flow line that goes for 30 miles? Like, what are you exactly talking about? If you just have a data analyst kind of come in and try to mess with all these systems, they could provide you an answer, just like you said, Chris, but it could just be a black box that isn't actually going to provide you with any value. And so it's a very long step and wavelength between where we are today to where we'll probably be in 30 years. And I think you're going to need a lot more people to be a lot higher on their game. And it'll be very evident because if all these models come back, I think initially people will be very excited. But I think that a lot of people will kind of get to the point where they're just messing around with AI. And because they're messing around with AI, everyone's going to be fat, dumb, and happy. And they're going to be like, we thought we would realize much more efficiency than this. Like, what is going on? And then I think you'll realize that people are kind of just really faking it till they make it. And you'll actually get to the point where it's real. And that hype will actually die down. And the actual true innovations and true value will be made probably in like the next 5 to 10 years, not in the next 1 to 2.
So I have an example of AI going wrong for a business, and it's something that's very interesting that actually, believe it or not, happened to somewhere close to me, where you guys know Open Door, right? Open Door is an iBuying service. One of the things that they do is they will buy your home. If you put it to them, they'll create an offer for you and they'll be able to offer you cash for it. They'll pay you the money and all you have to do is sign the paperwork and then you leave, right? Well, one of the things that they did was there was a apartment that was in my condo complex. And because they were in such a rush to get as many places as possible, their AI was, or their software, whatever, maybe their machine learning algorithm was deciding like, hey, this one apartment that's like in another building, it's worth X money. Okay. The thing is, they didn't know that the person that was living right next to that was the craziest person, smoked weed all day, would threaten people's lives, would be fucking crazy as hell the entire time. And so people, those are factors that weren't factored in. They got a price for that specific condo that was way, way beyond what I thought it was valued for. That any realtor would have just looked at and said, oh my God, there's no way in hell that this is worth this much. But the iBuyer, which was Open Door, paid a significant amount of money for that apartment. Guess what happened 6 months later? Turns out when the buyers, because sellers, you can sell to anyone. Buyers will do their homework. They did the research. No one would touch that. And I think they sold it at like almost like a 30-40% loss on what they bought it for. So I think people thought, hey, I could just use an algorithm to decide on buying homes. And that is somehow a replacement for a real realtor that can go in and do all the stuff that, that needs to be done, where they can actually get it appraised properly and do all the foundational homework, because they thought that would help in cutting the cost. It ended up biting them in the butt, and that's happened significantly for them, because if you look at their stock price, it's gone down significantly. It's recovered slowly, but yeah, I think a lot of homes were bought up at prices that were just crazy, and then they had to unload a lot of that inventory at much cheaper prices. So even when I hear like the term iBuying, where they want to rely on some kind of algorithm to determine the price of a home, I'm like, screw that nonsense. You better go figure out what the real that home is cracked. Is there leaks in the roof? Are your neighbors fucking crazy drug addicts that are probably cartel members? Like, those are the things that you're not going to have the AI algorithm determine for you.
Yeah, you need all the data. You need all the data,
Yep.
right? Otherwise, you can make your own story just like this, right? And we talked about that with Foundry, right? If you don't collect all the data, or you only look at a portion of the data, you can make up any answer that you want. And so it's important that you have something like a Foundry or something that allows you to truly explore all the data, to be able to make the appropriate decisions. And that's where I think so many people, just like this example that you said with Open Door, so many people throughout so many different industries and companies that have been able to get rid of what they would claim spurious data and then just only focus on certain subsets of data to make decisions and make the absolute wrong decision, just like this person did at Open Door.
Okay.
Yeah, bring up
Chris,
that.
we saw you for a little bit.
Yeah. Bring up that comment that that was just made by what's the name? I think Aaron.
AI has intelligence but not wisdom.
Yeah, that's exactly the point.
Okay. I think that's it for us. Thank you all for joining us for another Palantir Weekly. Government deals, AI, stock price now at 16. We'll see what goes on over the rest of the summer. And we got no markets on Monday. So no purpose in my life on Monday, but that's okay.
Amit, are you buying any more? That's the real question.
No, not at these prices. No, not at these prices.
Too good for us, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, again, at 12, 13, I would reconsider it, but I have a nice position. 16, 17, given we don't have Q2 numbers, not yet. Now, my thesis has been I'm not selling either. I mean, I was up decent amount of money over the past couple of days just looking at it at the tops. And it's just like, if it keeps going up, we'll enjoy the ride. If it goes down, we'll buy the dip. That's it for me, because I just, I've never been good at timing any of this stuff. So
it's fun. It's fun watching like Amit evolve as an investor. Like he went from, like, if you look 2 years ago, a lot of his videos versus what he is now, he's learning and he's adapting. What do you guys think about that? What do you think of Matt and Steven? Like, have you seen the evolution in Amit?
I have, for sure. I mean, even if you go back on my channel, I think you would see the same, right? I used to be a heavy dividend investor. And it got to the point where, I almost made a voice note about this on Twitter. And then, Steven, I'd love to hear what you think as well. But I work in the oil and gas industry, just like TJ, and a very volatile industry, a lot of layoffs, and the price of oil is very cyclical. And so with that, I saw very quickly within my career, 8-9 years ago, layoffs happen right in front of my eyes. Like, I went from this place that would have like, oh, you can order any whiskey you want at the holiday party as long as it's below $25, to, hey, people are getting laid off in front of my eyes. And I'm like, oh shit, like I just graduated college. Like I didn't think this was going to happen. Right. So I got very much into dividend investing, saying this isn't going to fuck me up. Right. I'm going to have an income stream no matter what. And I got to the point where I was making like $8,000, and the next year I made $11,000 in dividend income. The next year I made like, I forget, 18. And 2 years ago I started making like over 20,000. I'm like, man, if I ever really needed to, like, I could always come back to dividend investing, but I'm like, am I actually gonna life-changingly change my quality of life by investing strictly into dividend income? I noticed how I was underperforming the market in terms of capital appreciation. All I was focusing on was getting my dividend income as high as possible. And then I was just like, you know what, man? Like, and this is probably like 3-4 years ago, where I was like, I need to start focusing on long-term balanced growth and potentially value if I see it, but a mixture between the both, right? It's not all full-on hyper growth technology stocks. And so I transformed into being strictly a dividend investor to where I am kind of today, which is try some things out, have that underlying base, but don't sell yourself short and try to match the market rather than try to like only focus on income. And I've learned a lot through the past 10 years, and I see a lot of the same sort of evolutions that Amit has kind of had, of going only from it seemed like he was very much into very speculative only sort of positions, to now being like, yes, it's speculative, but it has a story, and I feel like I have conviction in this story. And so I see that. But sorry, Chris and Steven, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
I think surrounding yourself with good investors is one of the key things that can really help you and set you apart.
Chris, did you just give yourself a backhanded compliment?
No, I meant more like, I meant more like guys like Steven and Matt. I mean, yeah, some part of it me too, but you have
actually a big part of my Robinhood gains right now are you. So yes,
yeah, I appreciate that. But I think what's more important than that is that you have developed a community around learning, for not just for yourself, but for other people. And by watching your videos, they're getting the opportunity to learn with you, right? It's not so much that like one of the hardest challenges for me back in the day when I was investing, I felt like I was investing alone, where I had to learn everything by myself. Like there was no guides out there, there was no
Agreed.
mentors, or there was no one giving sound advice on what to look for, where to look, right? And the only people that you really had to rely on were guys like Jeremy and Meet Kevin and everyone else who were actually doing these videos. Now the thing is, they're going to invest based on their style, just like the rest of us. But now there's a lot more people out there that are doing very similar things to ours, so you can gravitate towards people and say, okay, you know what? Let me see what this guy is talking about. Let me see how his companies that he talks about, how they perform over time. And some of the guys that really started this, like Jeremy, has had a ton of success, and a lot of his viewers have had a ton of success as well, following into some of the things that he was saying and trading on, right? So, and I hope the same thing happens to some of the guys that asked me about my areas. I do want to say and preface that with, listen, you got to make decisions based on your own DD, and you have to do that. But I always try to provide as much data as I can and transparency where I see value, and just show it to people. I will probably not show some of the more speculative names that I have researched in as much. But that's, like I said, that's more me not feeling comfortable, because it's a risk I'm willing to take, but it's not a risk that I would want someone else to take, even if the gains are pretty outsized. So like I said, the strategy that made Amit a lot of money, I spoke to Amit about it because I was like, you know what, at this point, we're friends. He knows I'm not coming from a bad place trying to just pump and dump on him, and I'm actually showing you my own DD and saying, hey, look, this is what it is. And I'm not just showing you what I think is good, but I'm showing you the execution method, which I think is probably the other 50% that you need. I think a lot of times people will show like, oh, this is a great company, but they won't show you like, hey, these are the price targets to watch out for, or hey, this is the perfect time to get in, and maybe this is the time where you should be trimming down. I
Yep.
think that's one of the key differences. And I feel comfortable sharing that with Amit. I'm not comfortable sharing that with a lot of people right now because I don't know them. I don't know their personal situation. So I'm sorry. All I can do is point you halfway. The other half, you're going to have to just do a little bit more research and figure out how you're going to get to the end goal.
No, and that's why I agree. It's priceless, bro. Because at 25, no 25-year-old knows what the fuck they're doing in the stock market unless you were starting at 18, 19 and you were obsessed with it. I was obsessed with a lot of things at 18, 19. Stocks weren't it. I started getting obsessed around 22 years old. And during the greatest bull market of all time, I lost money. That's how bad I was. Like I couldn't fucking make money on anything because I just didn't get it. And like those are the mistakes you have to go through. And then, Steve, you're muted. You might be talking to someone else. But I was just going to say, Steve, me and Steve talk on the phone every day. Just like me and Chris talk every day. Matt, we talk pretty much every day, every other day. And I asked these guys for advice. I called Steve the other day. I was like, yo, Steve, what do you think about this? And he breaks down for 30
Stopped
minutes.
you from making a bad mistake.
Yeah. I guess, okay, so this is going to be so embarrassing.
Don't get into it because I don't want people to get confused about these
Whoa,
things.
yeah, remember when Amit, you were like, hey, Open Door and DNA? Who is the guy that would told you like, hey, maybe you should calm down. Maybe these are not the companies to look at.
Yeah.
And remember, right now is a different era than 5 years ago or 10 years ago. There's the access to information is much different. And look, Matt, I think a lot of people get into the place you were at and start asking those questions. And I think the biggest mistake people make is not being honest with themselves up front and making a plan and ask the one question that everybody should ask. Why am I investing? What is my goal? What is my long-term outlook for my career? Where do I want to be? Why am I investing? And you need to create a plan and work backwards for whatever your goals want to be. Because the answer is there is no one correct way to invest. Different situations call for different things. And different people are going to have different investment styles to achieve their goals. And look, everybody's got their own opinion. One of the most important things, I think, Chris has said it before, if you are in a position where you can max out your 401 or 403, I strongly recommend that. If you're in a position where you can max out an IRA or a SEP, these are probably good ideas to start. And look, if you say, I want to be a millionaire and I want to make $10 million by the time I am X age, you're going to have to pick a lot of winners. And here's the thing. If you invested in Apple, I actually looked at a chart the other day in 1995, and you put 10 grand in, it would be worth something like $5.5 million right now. How many people are going to hold Apple for that long? And how many people are going to drive themselves crazy or other people crazy? What should I sell? Should I not sell? I mean, some people aren't built for that. And a lot of people lose money trying to beat the market because they aren't good at it, don't do enough due diligence, whatever it is. Most investors are probably better off just investing in an S&P fund. And that's why I say, if you're investing in individual equities, you have to assume the same amount of risk and the fact that this investment could go to zero the same way you're accepting the capital appreciation if it occurs and you double, triple, or quadruple your money, because it is risk you're assuming for your capital. So everybody needs to make a plan and allocate money appropriately, because it can go sideways very quickly if you're not careful and you don't stay on top of things. And for the dividend aspect, you're not going to get rich investing in dividends. And rich is a very loaded word because rich means different things to different people. But you make a lot of money by investing in companies that retain earnings and increase their earnings potential over years by growing different profit centers and compounding their rate of doing so. You don't get rich by collecting dividends. Dividends are great. And some people look at dividends as a safety net. I personally look at dividends as I am allocating X amount of my capital toward dividends because when I get to a certain age, I want this income to pay for X, Y, and Z. And I'm not going to disclose what that is.
I will only say one thing about that. 90% of what you just said, I agree with, Stephen. But it's funny because your whole title is dividend streams. Just want to point that out real quick. What's more important though is that when you have companies, even if they do pay dividends, if they've gone to a point where they become super undervalued, that means that there's actually a lot of room for capital appreciation on top of the dividends that you're going to be collecting. That's the difference. Me and Stephen right now, we're investing in a few companies jointly. We know what they're like, and one of the things is that the capital appreciation actually will vastly outperform the dividend stream that we get. But at the same time, because we're at such a slow pace, we're going to be collecting very healthy dividends. Like I'm talking about dividend returns that you could not believe. But the thing is, we're taking some risk to do that, but we understand what we're investing in, and we have both dividend income coming in and capital appreciation coming in. When you have a combination of those two, dude, that is a powerful mix of returns.
But also keep in mind, we're assuming a lot of risk on that because, and I'm not going to say what the company is because we could be wrong. I don't want people following us into this, but because of the headlines and because of the news cycle and because of the macro, there is a lot of risk in this play. Chris and I see something in it. We both agreed on this. We talked about this a lot via private text. And from where the book value is and what we see going on by doing a lot of research, it looks like there is a good amount of capital appreciation and it is a very healthy dividend. And to Chris's point, there are companies that look very undervalued and they're growing their earnings and they're buying back shares. And that's something that I look for. I love a 3% dividend with a company that is buying back shares hand over fist that's growing earnings. There are two plays that I can think of that I love right now, and I want to buy more of it because I like buying businesses that grow earnings, grow revenue, buy back shares, increase the percentage of the company I own with every share they buy back, and pay me a dividend so I reinvest that and buy more shares of an underappreciated company. But at the same time, I have my portfolio stretched out into baskets and max out my 401. Everything's in S&P index fund, and that's my safety net. Everything I allocate personally, I'm assuming the risk of allocating it. I have my big tech, I have my dividend stuff, at my speculative stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's fair. Go ahead, Chris.
One last thing. One of the things that everyone here should do is set a limit on their basically their FU money. Okay. What I mean by that is the thing that makes rich people even richer and then richer and then richer. What happens is for most retail investors and most people that are investing average amounts of money, you know, if this money is your life-changing money that you're always going to look at and that's what makes you rich and powerful and what makes you feel powerful, you're going to probably lose it faster than you think. But if you have money, like the reason why rich people stay rich is because they buy and hold for a long time. But at the same time, the reason why they can buy and hold for a long time is because they are literally just sitting on cash that's not doing anything for them, so that they can just go and buy a company and just chill on it for 10, 15 years, right? Whereas someone who's like using the trading mechanism to make a living, they're going to be, you know, constantly going in and out of the market. They're not going to be able to, you know, capitalize as much. So my goal, and I'll tell you guys openly, is to one day get enough money to the point where, and I'm not saying I'm close to it, I'm not that close to it, but it's getting there, is to have a portfolio which is just FU money. And that money I won't even think about. These are just, hey, this is a long-term company. I'm never going to
How
sell
much
it.
money
I'm
is
never
that?
gonna do
10 million, 15
Don't
million?
answer that.
No, it's to me, it's close to like, it's a lot. It's a lot of money, right? I'm nowhere near it, but I'm slowly getting there. Because I think some people, they have this misnomer like, oh, you can just buy a company, hold it forever, and that's okay. And I'm like, no, that's rich people talk. That's what rich people do. They just buy a company, hold it forever. But that's because they have like a basket of companies that are very similar in that line of thinking, and none of the returns are going to support their lifestyle. And that's exactly why, like, one of the advice that I gave to you, Amit, was any gains that you make, set a portion of it to the side and just think of that as your cash fortress that's just generating you income
Good
that you
advice.
can use to
Yeah.
quit your day-to-day shit. Like, imagine this YouTube thing doesn't work out, right? You don't want to be in a position where you're so dependent on YouTube income that you have to shuck and jive for everyone all the time. Like, nah,
Yep.
you want to get to the point where you can be yourself and say, you know what? I don't want to do this YouTube thing anymore. I want to quit my job. I don't want to do this YouTube. I quit. And basically turn this shit off and walk into the sunset and be fine. I'm sure Steven, he's already in that fuck you level of money position, right? So he can be a little bit more like chillax with things. Matt and me are probably in the same boat where we're good enough that we can eat at any restaurant we want. We're not good enough so that we go to a hotel room and bank a supermodel. We're not there yet. Right, Matt?
Well, look, the other thing that's very important is lifestyle. And, you know, we talk about investing in Palantir and philosophy and that type of stuff, but, you know, a big portion of it is living well below, not beyond, but below your means, because it becomes a cash flow analysis. How much money are you able to invest? If you are really smart with your money, you don't have to make a lot of money. If you live very cheaply, and you're able to invest more money because you're not going out to dinner, you're not going to buy coffee, you're not doing these things, and you're living well below your means, you're going to do very well in life. Too many people get into that trap of trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. I have seen people, as I'm sure you all three have as well, that have left the game after making 400 grand and they've moved to Vietnam or Thailand and they retired on 400 grand. And I've known other people that got to their mid 40s and left on 2.5 million, and they left the grid. They had YouTube channels and they would be active on social media. And I haven't heard from that guy in over a year. And he's just like, yep, I'm out. And he's done. He's just like, I don't need to be on YouTube anymore. I'm not going to be documenting the fact, he didn't want a target on his back. I'm retired, and he wanted to make sure he kept his money and wants to, he might reappear in 3 to 4 years if he gets bored. But at the end of the day, it's like I've seen people on both spectrums. Shit, I know somebody that has a decent amount of money that, closer to the $10 million mark, and they still feel like they don't have enough money. So it's really just dependent upon exactly what you said, Stephen, where you think your lifestyle needs, being realistic with yourself. And I think the last thing I'll do before I return it back to the room is in 2012, I had a very, very smart person. Smart, maybe not the right word, but they said something that was very, very intelligent and very wise at the time. and they said, respect what everyone says, right? And listen to what everyone says. Get their perspective. Listen to a lot of different perspectives. Internalize it. Think about it. Sit on it. Think about what that means to you, and think about what's meaningful to you and what's important to you. And then make your own decision and action plan associated with what everyone had. And that was based off of a technical analysis, right? Listen to everyone's technical opinion in the room. But it applies to a lot of different situations in life, because there's no, you want to go to college, you want to and start investing. It's like you could read a billion different books about a billion different things and read a billion different perspectives, and you're not going to know what the right one is. You have to, at the end of the day, trust your gut, be confident in yourself. And the thing that I think that we've noticed, and especially Chris, because he brought it up, and the reason why we kind of gone on this 20, 30-minute tangent, which I've actually loved, by the way, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, that's a tangent, is noticing how Amit came into this 2-3 years ago, very, very blank slate, and has understood more about himself and understand where he fits in the investing realm. He's somebody that has time on a daily basis to, one, be a media company that's focused around this, so he's able to kind of make those decisions. And same with Chris. This is something that is a Chris's hobby. So people are like, oh, I wish I could have his, it's like, well, are you willing to put 20 hours worth of work on a stock to be able to make a decision whether or not you're going to buy it? And if the answer is no, it's okay if you go with what Steven said, which is investing in the S&P 500 and focus on things that might be like something like a side hustle. Maybe you're a great carpenter, right? Your time, if you have like an hour or 2 hours worth of time, instead of focusing it on trying to make an extra $20, $30 in the stock market, go try to figure out something. You could get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars on a weekend to be able to do some small carpentry work, and then take that and put it in the S&P 500 and get your 7 to 8% a year. And I learned that very early on when I was trying to be like, oh, let me try to day trade this and get an extra percent here. Let me just like, no, I could make a YouTube video or do a sponsored video on YouTube or make some sponsored articles on TikTok or Instagram and take away $500, $1,000. I've been paid $2,000 a video cash to be able to do some of those things, and it takes an hour or two. Instead of me trying to make $1,000 or $2,000 in the stock market, which I go up 20,000, I go down 30,000. It happens all the time. It's like, do something that that is in the best time value of your money and opportunity.
Matt, did you see the guy there's a YouTube channel, right? This guy just goes to people's houses and just mows their lawn for free. Okay. But he records the entire thing. And I'm just like floored by it, because it's like 1 million views. All right. There's another guy that does people's driveways, and he's getting like 1 million. I'm like, bro, he is getting so much money from AdSense revenue. And the funny thing is, it's so satisfying to watch, because I started watching, and now like when I'm like trying to fall asleep sometimes, like I'll watch, just to like, oh yeah, that guy's fucking lawn's dirty, man. I wonder if someone will clean. And then this guy will like just trim everything. And I'm getting ideas too. Like whenever I buy a house, I'm like, yeah, you know what? The first thing I'm gonna do is buy a fucking pressure washer.
Well, to Matt's point, it was so funny. He just said, I go up 30,000, I go down 20,000. It's so crazy, because Chris used to send me some screenshots back in like January of him being up like $9,000, $10,000 on position, whatever. Like, and like he would just send me those things, just be like, just see what he's doing. I wasn't doing anything yet. I wasn't in any options or strategies or anything. And I'm just like, damn, Chris, how does it feel? Like you're up $10,000. Like that's $10,000. It's right there in front of you. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I was like, how do you not feel like rich right now? He's like, I mean, like, yeah, it's a lot of money, but it's $10,000. And then as I started becoming more of a little bit better of an investor, literally, Matt, I mean, I've seen those numbers too. You're up 30,000, you're down right back, but you have a long-term horizon. You know what you're doing. You're not selling and buying immediately. You're not trading. You're just like, this is the position, and this is how it's going to go, over time. And it's so interesting to see that evolution of me as myself, because at some point they become numbers on the screen, and you have to have an exit strategy. And if your exit strategy is just all over the place because number look big, me take profit, that's not an exit strategy.
What goes back to what Steven said, right? You're buying a position in the company. You're not just sitting there being part of the fugazi of, it being going up and down one day. Like the market and the macroeconomic environments, the microeconomic environments, and the way that people emotionally feel about the organization is what's always going to be driving the stock price. And if you know and have conviction, and you kind of understand internally, and you focus and you kind of remove yourself from all that crap, You do the appropriate due diligence. Like Chris showed me something. He's like, hey, take a look at this. And I know Steven's in it as well. I was like, this makes sense, right? I was just like, it seems so simple. And it seemed like, so if you just do the right decision, and that took me 10 hours or so. Chris asked me about it over the course of a couple of days. Like I only got halfway through it. And then, it forced me to continue to like do the DD. And I'm excited. Like I think it's one of those things that has the potential to 2-3x and pay a little bit of a drip in the meantime as well. And so it's something like that, but it takes time. It takes effort. You can't just be like, oh, I saw Mitt talking about SoFi and just like get in, because you could be like Chris, like you could be in it for the long term, Mitt, and Chris could be something like how he's in Palantir, where he took a position and then he got out of it. And
yeah, people are like, oh, Amit just follows Chris. I mean, like, yeah, Chris is mentoring me a lot, but I haven't sold any of my Palantir because of Chris, right? Because there's just a different level of conviction, and that's okay.
Exactly.
That's
okay, right? Chris made profit.
Due diligence. What Matt just said. If you're going to invest in an individual company, you should be doing a lot of due diligence. And look, I have a full-time job that is more than 40 hours a week.
Okay, to be fair, Steven, I call you every day, and
if I'm not in a meeting, I pick up
I
the phone, but I multitask. But look, when I get home, I'm doing at least 3 hours of research at night when I get home. I'm usually doing research until 9:30, 10 at night. And over a weekend, Friday night to Sunday night, I've probably done 20 to 25 hours of research to write the Seeking Alpha articles, because I usually write 3 or 4 articles from Friday when I get home to Sunday night and have them published throughout the week. And I write 1 article at night during the week. And I do a tremendous amount of due diligence on the companies that I like.
And that's why I like calling you and talking to you.
Right? And I'm not saying that people need to do the same level as me because I'm crazy. Okay. But if you're going to invest in a company, you should at the very minimum listen to the earnings call, skim or read the entire annual report, and keep up with the headlines at a very minimum. But, going back to the macro, we haven't had a great macro, but think about a company like Coca-Cola. How many years have they been in business? How many presidential administrations have they been through? How many recessions have they been through? How many crazy situations have they been through? And continuously paid a dividend for over 100 years. I think they're at 58 or 62 years of dividend growth. I mean, great companies, you're not going to, if you own a company, if you own Coca-Cola outright, you're not selling Coca-Cola because something happened in the macro environment that's a headline. Unless you think America is screwed over the next 20 years, like really screwed, you're not selling your business. Like
yeah, but Steven, also Coke, you would have underperformed. It just depends on when you got in. You're talking about someone. If you're talking about Warren Buffett who got in the 80s, yes, that's exceptional growth. But if you got
I'm talking about very long term. I'm just saying that people don't sell an accounting firm because of headlines. People don't sell an electrician company because of headlines. And I really think people need to get out of this whole mentality, unless you're a trader or a momentum investor. Because look, what I'm saying does not apply to that, because you are playing the volatility and you are playing the momentum. But if you are investing in great companies and doing your due diligence, long-term investing is probably the best outcome, unless something happens to make your investment thesis change.
Yeah, and I want to supplement with that. I think a lot of people are probably like, man, Matt, I wonder how many times you've doubled or tripled your money. It's like probably not a lot, to be very frank. I had a problem when I was living in Trinidad and Tobago, is a perfect example. I think I got down to expenses of $1,500 a month, which was very, very little for me. I had a car payment that was paid for by the organization. I rent those. So it's basically just me entertaining people and going out and having a good time, going out on nights on the town. And that was $1,500 a month. I was living the dream in Trinidad and Tobago. I miss that place a lot. The rest of that money, I mean, you guys probably know I do pretty well. I was investing all of it. I probably had over a 50-60% savings rate on my gross income, and the other amount of that went to taxes, right? So that's the level of diligence. Like, can you sit there and say, if I had $1,500, I wouldn't be outblown it on this or that. And to this day, I probably save. I still calculate at least $4,000 to $5,000 a month that I put into the stock market, and it's been that way probably over the past 10 years or so. And so you think about it, it's like I probably have saved a crap ton of money and invested a crap ton of money. And it goes to show you, it's like a very simple way. It's like if you have a 6, 7%, 7-8% return, you incorporate inflation, say 2.5%. If you invest 90% of your money, you're going to be able to retire in 3 years because you're only living off of 10%. So if you invest, you're going to end up with like 27 or 30x the amount of money that you've been living on over the past 3 years. You're going to be able to retire versus if you're only saving 5% or 10%. I think if you invest 5% and you get a 5% return, I think you're going to have to work 51 years for you to be able to retire. If you save, I think something like 10%, it drops down to 40%, 40 years. Sorry. I think if you save 30%, it drops down to like 17 years.
Think about what Matt just said. Picking a number, budgeting for it, sticking for it, and investing it. All you have to do is pull up an investment calculator, figure out what you are comfortably able to invest after your obligations, set it on monthly, put it 7% return. That way you're just under the S&P, so you're very conservative on it, and play around with the numbers. You can do very well over a 30-year period at 7%, investing X amount every month. I think people would be shocked. Instead of trying to drive themselves crazy, trying to find home runs and trying to find this and trying to find that, just looking at what you can accomplish over a 30-year period just by investing the same amount every month. And look, the great thing about the S&P, you're investing in the 500 largest companies in the United States. It's going to be very hard for that to go away. If that goes away, we have real bigger problems in the stock market.
And they're guaranteed profitable, right? They're guaranteed profitable. They change out quarterly. Yep. And so if they make any mistakes before they start really going down off of a cliff, they're already kicked the fuck out, right? So
you don't have to do any due diligence.
There's also one last piece of advice. You should always hang out with guys who go to the golf courses and who look like they're gonna die soon, because you become friends with them, and when they die, you hook up with their older mistresses and their cougars, and there you go. Now you got yourself a sugar mama. That's what you need to do.
Chris,
Get yourself
I grew up
a sugar
playing
mama.
cards in a caddy yard.
The fuck?
I started caddying at 13
That was the best
years
advice.
I was freaking playing cards.
That's the advice I get from Chris at 2 a.m. when we talk. He's like, "Yeah, make sure you just fuck older guys as wives. That's what we gotta do."
Just get you a sugar mama, or someone who's like a doctor. Like, that's the whole thing in the Indian community. Like, you marry a doctor or pharmacist, you're good. Like, that's what I did. I'm like, oh, my wife, like, I met her, I loved her, she was great, but more than that, she was making good money. I was like, man, you know what? With your income stream and my good looks, we're gonna be just fine.
Oh God!
All right.
She was watching, because she's texting me angry shit right now.
Your sugar mama or wifey Patel?
She needs to make sure you're not saying anything crazy.
No, but look, people should definitely.
Luckily for me, my sugar mama is my wife. So, except I was tricked. She came with a shit ton of student loan debt, which she will work on, right, dear? You will work on it.
Chris, you and I should do a rant one day about how predatory loans are, and just because you and I feel the same exact way on student loans.
Chris, is she paying them off, or are you paying them, or you're both paying them off together? You're muted, by the way. You're talking. He's texting his wife right now.
Being abused.
My phone's blowing up because I'm in New York right now and she's in Georgia, and so she's messaging me and it's like crashing the link. But she's paying her student loans, so that's her responsibility. I was in the military. I have no student loans. That's not my responsibility to deal with her stuff. But so we have, believe it or not, even though like when I first started dating her, it was like, oh, we should have a joint account with joint expenses and all this other stuff. But then like over the relationship, we're like, nah, you know what? You keep your shit to yourself. I'll keep my shit to myself. So I pay for everything in New York. She pays for everything in Georgia. We haven't even combined our finances yet. But yeah, overall, she's taking care of her side. And now she's investing on her own too. You know, I mean, with my clear guidance, of course, but but yeah.
Killing it.
All right. That's it for us. Thank you, everybody, for joining Palantir Weekly. We will see you guys next week, and we'll be back at it. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks all.
Good night.